Imagine an education system where parents have the power to shape their child's learning journey. Schools focus on real-world skills, and every student has access to personalized opportunities, whether in a classroom or at home. A conversation about school choice, homeschooling support, and the future of learning takes center stage. We're diving deep into what education transformation really means. Are we ready to rethink the way we teach and learn? Stay with us as we explore the policies, challenges, and possibilities that could redefine the future of education for generations to come. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Education Transformation. We have a new president in the United States today, and there is a lot of talk that's very meaningful for those of us who are involved with and care about education. So we are hoping to touch on some of those topics today. Again, the purpose of our podcast is really to ignite this conversation because we recognize that we are headed in a new direction, and we want the voices of the people who are involved, the students, the parents, the practitioners. We want a platform where their voices can be heard so that the powers that be can really understand from firsthand experiences and accounts what's really going on and what we really need to do to make education meaningful. So without further ado, here's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hi,
So I want to actually just jump right in by sharing that I connected with one of my students from the United Arab Emirates yesterday. So grateful to her for tracking me down on Instagram. And you know, she just started out by saying, I'm fed up. I've reached my limit. You know, and this is a student that I remember very well with great perseverance, incredible work ethic, really coming from a family that values education. So she had a lot of the right things going for her. And now she's nearing the end of her compulsory education and feeling a bit more in her own skin, I imagine, feeling a little braver and voicing her opinions, her authentic opinions. So when I pressed her a bit to understand where she was coming from and asked her what was bringing her to her limit, she said it's the curriculum and the homework. You know, just this excessive amount of work that she's having to do that she doesn't really see the value in outside of grades and checking those boxes, and in a lot of students' cases getting their parents' approval. But outside of that, she's feeling really burdened, and my heart goes out to her. I mean, that's really why I left education 6 years ago, right? Because I had been in it, and you know, a couple of decades at that point, and had felt that I had reached my limit. You know, I had tried in all of these different ways to make changes on a small scale with just in my classroom, on bigger scales as administrator and as a college instructor teaching the future teachers. But in every situation, I kept finding that the bureaucracy, the small box of traditional education, all of those things they seemed impenetrable. And so I left to prove to myself that what I had been believing for decades as a better way, I could put into practice. And yeah, I did that 6 years ago, and I found out that I was right. I was really enjoying education for the first time, and all of the students that I was working with all around the world were also enjoying learning. We were finally capturing that childlike enthusiasm and curiosity that we're all born with, to learn, to discover, to grow and develop. And so my heart goes out to her, and that's why we're here, and we want to just keep that conversation going. So I know we both watched US President Trump's inauguration speech yesterday, and look, I'm especially not political in the sense that I'm not divided. I really look at government as a system that is meant to unify people and bring people together in ways that help us all. So I'm not advocating for or against Trump in this position, but I am saying that he's advocating for change. And so let's get behind that, focus on change, and be a part of the solution instead of the problem, right? So, do you want to?
Looks like there's some big changes coming.
Yeah.
I mean, potentially. I don't know.
It's true. It's all potential right now, right? As our experience dictates.
One of the biggest ones was what, I guess, him he was talking.
Abolishing the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Maybe that one. That's pretty big.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we heard some of the arguments against that, none of which really inspired us to be in favor of that side of things. Like, well, the federal government is supposed to make sure that schools get money, but states can do that, right? And make sure that schools are enacting policies that are equitable. Again, states can do that. So
Yeah, we've been saying for years that there's just too much
money is spent on it.
Yeah.
There's too many people not directly involved in helping students develop and live their best lives that are getting paid ridiculous salaries, and it's not trickling down at all. It's trickle down economics. It does not work in this education system. And I don't know what Trump's talking about with cronyism. I think that exists in all forms of the government.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple of things that I feel even in his policies or his proposed policies that might incite more cronyism, but we can talk a little bit about that as we get through them.
So much that it's more like just the controversy, I think, around just the statement of cutting or abolishing the Department of Education. For one, it sounds like it has a negative connotation by just like removing
I'm
it.
sure that's intentional.
And then also by
I don't know about intentional.
the saying that they're cutting funds to schools where it's not, hopefully it's not going directly cutting the funds to schools, but to, all these administrative fees that, come from the DOE. So
yeah, that doesn't make sense to me. That whole that it's going to cut funding to schools by getting rid of the Federal Department of Education. I mean, I fail to see how that's going to affect schools. I mean, the tax money is going to come in, and when it comes in, instead of it filtering through a bunch of positions at the federal government level, it should directly then just go down to the state government levels, which should free up a lot of money. I mean, it seems like it should free up a lot of money anyway. But promoting school choice, this is one that I'm really excited about. This idea that parents can start to choose their schools, and then effective programs will hopefully get more funding because they will get more students, they will get more support, and effective strategies can start to surface. We hope. We hope. But along those lines goes with his plan, the 529 education savings accounts, which I know we were reading some different reports about it, but I heard in a few different scenarios this idea of getting $10,000 per student per year, tax-free, not getting, but rather that it can be tax-free income that they use for homeschooling. So that also, I think, is promising, right? That homeschool parents and homeschooling to me is lending itself more and more to what we call micro schools, which is something that I'm really well versed in when we're collecting a few families together and educating their children together with a certified and trained teacher. So microschooling and homeschooling to me are going to become really synonymous. And the fact that money now, people can not necessarily be reaching in their own pockets to make that choice is really, really promising. What were some of the other ones? Well, eliminating the woke ideologies. Oh, I think that's a topic for maybe another podcast because we both feel strongly about that and in a way are really much in favor of it. Like this is not, in my opinion, where the focus in education should be on what kind of pronoun you want to be called or what kind of bathroom you want to use and all of that stuff. That to me, it's more of a personal. This is your personal life. I don't know. It's we touch on that another time. That's a loaded one. But reforming teacher employment. Now this is where there are a lot of points here which are super awesome, and I have a great personal story that I want to share about one of them, which is removing the teacher tenure. I don't understand the purpose of teacher tenure. I don't see the value in it. And my story that I want to share is from way early on. While this was happening in my life is also when the World Trade Centers were hit with those airplanes. So I remember it very vividly, and I was teaching as a college professor part-time and teaching part-time in a kindergarten as a special education teacher. And I remember the teacher asking the students to all draw a picture of their family. And this little boy drew a picture of his family, which had a lot of people in it. I want to say it was like 12 to 15. It was a full picture. And when he brought his picture to the teacher, she ridiculed him and told him that there was no way that many people were living in his family, in a very unpleasant voice, in a yelling kind of voice, told him to go back to his table and draw only the people that were in his family. So this crushed me, of course, and I went crouched next to him, and he proceeded to tell me every single person in the picture, who they were, how they were related to him, and where everybody was sleeping in his house. This boy was not from, he was from a lower economic background, and he was clearly in a situation where his family was sharing a house with extended family members. And when I went to the administration, this is just one example that I had with this teacher, where she was just crushing little children's self-esteem and self-perceptions on a daily basis. And when I went to the administration, they basically said, we know, and there's nothing we can do about it, because she's a tenured teacher. So unless she physically abused somebody or comes to school drunk or on drugs, their hands are tied. So I'm like, yes, let's get rid of teacher tenure. It isn't doing anybody any favors, I mean, I get that there's sabbaticals and there's other benefits, and maybe there's ways to keep incentives for teachers to be in the field, because we know that is a huge problem also. They are dropping like flies because just came to mind. We almost called this podcast, Why Aren't There Cameras in the Classroom? Which is coming to mind right now because nobody wants to know what it's really like. Merit-based pay. Now, this is one of his points that I also, this is a little harder because...
They tried this and it failed.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too, is you as the teacher, you don't know what you're gonna get. I mean, teacher A might get a classroom full of students who at home are supported by their parents, surrounded by resources, not dealing with, drug and alcohol abuse, and then there's another teacher who might have a handful of kids with these issues.
I know, that merit is a weird term. It needs to be, definitely shouldn't be based on student performance, because,
yes.
So like how do you, gauge merit? Somebody that's completely dedicated to their work, but may not be getting the results because of what you just said. There's a number of reasons.
And that goes back to like the whole child development topic, right?
Obviously you can look it up, but they did try this before, and I think it was Georgia, and found that teachers were obviously they're inflating grades. Why? Because they're incentivized by getting more money by the students' performance. So but then if we talk about inflating grades, I mean, the teacher's inflating it for merit pay, or the administration is either forcing teachers to change grades or just changing grades behind closed doors, because then they want the stats so that they can have the good ratings or whatever. But we're talking about
fair enough. We'll stay on topic. But yes, merit-based pay is a tricky one, and it would have to be worked out in such a way that we're really valuing the effort and the dedication of the teacher versus outcomes, and that effort would relate to outcomes if the teacher wasn't restricted by this prepackaged age-based curriculum, in my opinion. Because in my experience, in working in the Always Meaningful Education model, that's what I have found, that kids from all different economic backgrounds and different intellectual abilities, different family structures, were finding success in the AME model, and progress was measured and growth was measured. And if teachers' merit was based on that, and we were looking at the whole child, their social, their emotional, their cognitive, their physical development, then maybe we could really rethink how pay is based on merit. But parents electing principals. Okay.
I didn't hear about this one.
I don't want to I don't want to make fun of it. It does make me laugh, obviously. But I just think about, again, the parents may not really understand the skill set that is needed. And while I applaud his idea to put power in the hands of parents to give them a greater choice, and parents do deserve to have more choice. Choosing school leaders
It shouldn't be a popularity contest,
shouldn't be popular. It's a good way to put it.
They're not. I don't agree with that one.
And this again, to me, is like it sort of incites a bit of cronyism again. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just people picking people they know or their friends. I don't know. I'm a little uneasy about that one. But anyway, it's teacher reform.
The most important thing is that they're talking about revamping the education, and
Yeah.
that big changes should be coming, and
Yes.
that the students and everybody will benefit.
Absolutely.
Teachers, community, everybody. So
Yes.
he kind of, I think sometimes, speaks before he thinks, or sometimes has these grandiose plans, but what's important is that change is afoot.
Yes.
We'll see what that looks like
Yes.
in the coming weeks and months.
And if we can have our say in what kind of change is coming, oh, well, there's a lot.
Mm.
There's really a lot. But I mean, I personally think we need to really step away from this standardized education model where everybody's supposed to be learning the same thing at the same time. I mean, this is so antiquated. It reminds me of what Jim Quick said about Rip Van Winkle. Remember, we were listening to his podcast. And he said, what if Rip Van Winkle woke up today, he slept for 20 years. If he's been sleeping for 20 years and woke up today, the only thing he would recognize is the schools.
The classroom, yeah.
The classroom or something like that.
Everything
Yes.
else has changed.
Everything else has changed.
Yeah.
And then I heard on Andre Ducam's podcast, he was talking about how knowledge has changed, and his the resources that he used will come to me. But basically what he said is that in 1945, I think this was in Fuller's, it'll come to me, Fuller's knowledge, it'll come to me. Anyway, the point was, in 1945, knowledge was doubling about every 25 years. And now it's predicted, and then it went up to knowledge was changing every 13 months, and then recently it was predicted that knowledge would be changing as fast as every 12 hours. So the fact that education looks the same as it did 100 years ago, and knowledge is changing, whether it even if it was 13 months, I mean, it's insane to me that we are still buying textbooks, making kids spend hundreds of dollars on textbooks to feed them knowledge that is changing by the time the textbook comes to the school. It's not even, but then I've not been a fan of textbooks for a very long time, and I know that there's a lot of disagreement about what to do about devices. Personally, I'm on the side of that where I feel like we need to embrace them and teach kids how to use them properly, because the wealth of information that's available to them on devices is insurmountable and up to date.
Yeah.
But then we get in a little bit in talking about the difference between information and knowledge, right? Because in my opinion, what's happening in schools is kids are being fed a lot of information, but it's not knowledge until they are able to, until they're able to synthesize it and apply it in life, right? So, but schools don't really emphasize that. They emphasize retaining and regurgitating, passing the test, right? So that's even another topic worthy of unpacking. Just why are schools just in this information dissemination?
Yeah, and like teaching now, we, like as a teacher, we are in our professional development work taught to not have students use route learning and all these. But at the end of the day, that's what this
That's what the test is asking them to do. Yeah, that's the test that's going to get them into college or get them into whatever, or get them out of high school or get them out of that class, is asking them to regurgitate that information. Yeah, so I've never been a big fan of that. In our school in Cabarete in the Dominican Republic, and even in the little micro school and homeschool models that we've been establishing around the world, the assessment is based on the real world application of what the child has learned, right? So we go on a learning journey and we have this input phase where the kids are inputting a lot of new information, right? So it's information at that point. They're reading about things, they're watching videos about things, taking notes about things, having discussions about things, playing games related to all of these things that they're learning. And then they go into the output phase, and that's when they are synthesizing and putting together that information and turning it into a knowledge and applying it to something real world with it, whether it be a product or a service or an event. They are taking that information, converting it to knowledge, for lack of a better term, and then applying it in a way that is meaningful, and the feedback is immediate, right? Like when we had the Space Museum in the Dominican Republic, there was immediate feedback because the students who built the Space Museum could see what are the areas that the other kids are going to, what are the things that they can engage with and learn something from it, and what are the stations that we set up that nobody understood how to do them. And it's immediate feedback. The kids are seeing what they built, what they created for others to learn from, and how they're engaging with it. And it's just one example, but much more meaningful than saying, oh, here's your science test grade, and then it's gone and you move on. So yeah, meaningful assessments. I would love for Trump to encourage people to step away from the standardized testing market, which we learned not too long ago, about, was it 13 billion? I don't want to exaggerate this number, but let's just say 13, maybe you do a quick search. I think it was $13 billion a year is spent on test preparations, like study services, test prep companies, test prep books. I mean, that fact in itself should incite anger or something inside of us to say, why we are spending billions of dollars to get kids to pass the test. Somebody recently shared an awesome Instagram video with me where a guy who's, we'll pull that up in a second, he made a little rap about what the school experience was like, and he talked about, oh, I'm so glad they taught me the Pythagorean theorem because it helped me a lot. I'm just kidding. Everything they taught me, I forgot, because it was a very poignant and well put together rap. I will share it in the comments so others can enjoy it as well. Did you get that stat?
Yeah, it's 1.7 billion.
1.7 billion. Okay, so
for standardized testing.
Okay, that's just, no, I'm talking about how much money are people spending to prepare their kids for the standardized test, not the standardized test companies in themselves. So yeah, it's more money than we should be spending. And if we were not worried about these standardized tests, imagine how we could funnel that money into meaningful experiences where the kids are applying what they've learned in real world contexts. In the Always Meaningful Education model, the output phase, the underlying goal of the output phase is always amelioration. It's always to make the world a better place in some way. Whether that is just sharing what you have learned with a larger community so that they can benefit from your knowledge, or as I said before, maybe it's creating a product or a service or an event to enjoy. But every single learning journey ends with the students applying what they've learned in some kind of meaningful way. And it gets them excited and they are super motivated. And one of my students affectionately coined the last 2 weeks of our learning journeys as crunch mode. And they get a real taste of what that's like because we have a deadline, and there are people in a larger community who are counting on us and expecting that product, service, or event, or whatever it is that we have created. So it's a real taste of what life is like when they're adults and they have actual deadlines as well. That's when executive functioning skills are really put into practice. Did you find?
No, I did not.
No. All right, we'll just say 13 billion and we will look forward to any comments. Speaking of comments, we really wanted to say thank you to everybody who has given us feedback. This is a learning journey for us as well. We could have waited to do this podcast until we were expert podcasters, but that's not how we live our lives. We are learning something new, and we are building our skills, and we appreciate so much everybody who's reached out to us to say, what about doing this? What about doing that? And we aren't going to take everyone's advice because we can't. We also have to be ourselves, but we are really grateful for the feedback, and it is a learning journey for us. We do plan to improve and get better each time we do it. It's certainly our goal. But again, the primary goal is just to get the conversation started. Let's start talking about it. Let's be a part of the solutions. What I always say to my students, are you contributing to the solution or the problem? Right? So let's contribute to the solution and share what we know. We had an introductory podcast already where we gave a little summary. And then we had episode 1 where we dived into a growth mindset a little bit. And we're looking forward to having some guests. We were thinking to have a guest this week, but due to the amount of feedback that we got, we decided to develop ourselves a little bit more before we start to invite people on the show with us. So you can look forward to that very soon. Anything else for today, Joe?
No, I think maybe another episode we can really just dive into the AME model, the Always Meaningful Education model, and give people an idea of what it is that you developed and how it works, from beginning to end, so that when we reference it in the future, hopefully people have a better idea of what that looks like. So
thanks. Yeah, that was one of our that was one of the feedbacks we got, which was just that we are, especially me, I'm using a lot of phrases, terminology, and referencing experiences that I am not explaining enough. So yes, let's unpack that a bit more so that people can, for future podcasts, understand exactly what we are talking about. And in the meantime, you can go to AME Revolution and see the website, which has an outline of the model in it and some photo evidence and some feedback from parents about how well they and their children have been enjoying it. So might be a good place to start. All right, well, thank you for joining us today on Education Transformation. We look forward to seeing you soon.